Two Sides the Carry-On Circle. Chapter 2, Antonio. Earlier that day. Dude, I'm not kidding, you have to listen to me. Tricky stated as he fanned the smoke out of his face. Antonio yawned, you're trippin' too hard and you're now ruining my trip. We are safe here, plus we aren't wanted right now. PFF right now. We are always wanted. I missed court and you are still on the streets. Antonio took another rip, relax. We got miles of desert around us, guns, and some hardcore people who would do anything not to go back to jail. Tricky bent down to get within eye level of his best friend. He whispered what only the two of them could hear, those people out there would give you up in a heartbeat. Those people who are going to protect us will just get us into more trouble. We have to start running again and leave everything behind. It's the only way to look out for ourselves. Tonio bro, you got a baby at home and a sheik who loves you. Just turn yourself in and be better for your family. First you were telling me that we need to take off again to avoid jail, but now you switched up saying I need to go back to jail. Fuck you, man. Tricky rolled his eyes, you don't even know what you're saying. It's always just been you and me, but now it's just me. I'm going back to my mom's for a while and I'll let you figure your shit out. I ain't going to law enforcement either. That is if they don't take me first. Antonio watched Tricky walk out of the room with just a single backpack. One last hit before the smoke knocked him out. Am I the victim? Am I the criminal? I guess I can say I've played both parts. It's the typical villain origin story. Mom dead at 5.5, drugged dad, kids running the streets. I went anywhere really just to be wanted. My sister is the only good one out of us Mendonzas. She has her demons, but not compared to my brother and I. Our sister played mommy at a young age, literally and metaphorically. This story doesn't start though till I was about 16. I was glued to my skateboard because it was my escape from home. I mostly rode in alleys jumping trash cans or in rural areas. I've lived in Los Campos my whole life, always loyal to the east side. If you were to ask me out of the four which one is my favorite, the east side is the only correct answer. The north and south sides are filled with rich pricks who think they run the world. The west side, gotta love it, but I ain't tryna get shot simply for stepping a toe over the county line. With any big city there are mainly two sections, the rich and the poor. One day I might see the rich, but I'll never come up the same way they do. Every big city has their secret societies that hide in the shadows. That's where you go to feel wanted. The big struggle is finding them. The afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt. I had just landed a trick I had been working on in my favorite hidden ally until I heard a familiar sound. I hid behind a larger dumpster to listen to the skateboard tracks pass me. I peeked around the corner to see the backs of two guys rounding the corner. I quickly dropped my board and rode as fast as I could to catch up with them. Weaving in and out of traffic, I stayed a little ways behind them in hopes they wouldn't notice me. A few minutes later, we ended up at the old courthouse on the border of the east side. There were hundreds of skaters from all over the city. All the cement and walls were covered in graffiti. The two skaters disappeared before my eyes, but it seems like I ended up in the right place. All of a sudden two arms grabbed me and I was dragged behind one of the graffiti walls. Just as I was about to start swinging the guy and I made eye contact. Marcos? What the hell are you doing? Oh sorry primo. We just saw somebody following us and we had to react. This is my buddy Jacob. Jacob, this is my cousin Antonio. Jacob extended his knuckles for a fist bump. Hey, man. Have you been here before? Antonio shook his head. Well, this is technically illegal, so don't go spreading the word. Marcos replied. What makes it illegal? Antonio asked. Jacob answered, since this is an abandoned place, they like to charge anyone over here with trespassing, even if you don't go inside. Yeah, they like to ruin everyone's fun. If you talk to the right people, they'll hook you up with trustworthy goods. Marcos said. What goods? You're 2 years younger than me. Jacob pointed to a cluster of boulders under a tree, and you see that? Heaven on earth right there. Sheiks who are super chill and like to smoke, plus they always know where the next bangin' parties are at. I chuckled and dropped my board on the floor. Let's go then. The sun couldn't be warmer as it began to set. Cruising down the concrete, everyone waved to each other and welcomed me in. This was the beginning of hopefully my new forever. Finally, a place where I felt loved and wanted just by a first meeting. Soon enough, I started spending all my afternoons there. I loved getting closer with my cousin, who was more of a brother to me than my actual one. I also gained another brother too. Jacob, Marcos, and I slowly became inseparable. I trusted these guys with my life and they felt the same towards me. Every so often the cops would show up and the adrenaline rush was unbeatable running from them. A wall of trust was beginning to be built between me and a lot of other people. After a while it started to become less fun when I was the only sober one. So what did I do? I joined my first smoke circle. A first smoke circle turned into a first pill. Drugs then mixed with alcohol. Soon enough it was whatever I could get my hands on. But it was fine because I trusted these people, so these things were not putting me in harm. It was just all good fun. Besides, Marcos started way before me. It wasn't long before I started getting into trouble when my older sister, Salia, was always there to bail me out. My dad was still doing his thing running the streets, so no matter where I went I was exposed to this. Even though Marcos and Jacob welcomed me in, it still felt like it was them two than me. It wasn't long before Tricky started skating at the courthouse. Tricky was known for his ties to 19th West and running his block in the West Side. Believe it or not, that gave him an abundant amount of street cred. Everyone wanted to be his friend because they knew they could get something from him. I don't know how, but I grew closer with Tricky. We bonded over losing a parent and being able to suck it up to continue living. It wasn't long before we became the iconic duo of Antonio and Tricky. Marcos's parents were absent a lot, so he began living with us. We had drifted apart, so it was nice to still have that cousin bond going home. Eventually, the four of us came together and we were the top dogs. I had girls all over me, but one stood out to me. This was Maria. I regret how our relationship went, and I guess I could blame the drug, but that wouldn't be 100% truthful. Wow. Maria, every time I think back to this time in my life, she was the most smokin' hot girl with the most smokin' hot personality. I was smitten with her, but of course I couldn't let anyone see that. She had her group of friends too, but it was clear she was the star, at least in my eyes. Not only was it the iconic duo of Antonio and Tricky, but the iconic couple of Antonio and Maria. I would kill for that girl, and my world was complete once I found out she felt the same. She was someone who I couldn't live without, and I didn't want to spend my life with anyone else. For the first time my life seemed perfect. I had a close group of friends, a girlfriend I loved with my whole heart, street cred, and so much more. Unfortunately though, what is up must come down. My dad was very open to Jacob, Tricky, and Maria living with us, but they all had homes too, so they only stayed with us occasionally. I didn't know much about Jacob's home life because he never talked about it much. It was an unspoken rule to never ask anyone about their home life, so I never asked. Tricky practically became a Mendoza though. Maria had a lot of self-control when it came to drugs and alcohol, but us boys had a free-for-all every time. Especially Jacob. What I can remember is every time he would come over or when we would skate, he would reach his limit as fast as he could and not leave until he was mostly sobered up. Each time his limit increased a little bit more, with testing fate just a little bit more too. I didn't know that day would be the last day I saw him breathing. I didn't know that pill would kill him. Everyone around me told me it was an accident, but deep down, I knew I killed Jacob. We each tried this new pill that my dad had gotten from somebody, but little did we know Jacob was already high on something else. By the time it hit him, it was too late. I can't remember much from that day, mainly from the trauma blocking, but also the pill had some sort of memory loss. None of us ever talk about it or even bring up Jacob's name. It wasn't until the day of the funeral I found out who Jacob actually was. I attended the funeral but came late and left early. I had my own reasoning and I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye. That was on purpose though. Marcos was the only person who truly knew Jacob and where he came from. I had no idea he came from the family of the famous bounty hunters in Los Campos. Thinking back, it all makes so much sense though. I remember being in the very back and seeing his entire family in the front row. All their faces I have seen before. Never did I think one day they would be hunting me. My older brother though wasn't so lucky. To this day I don't know if he's out of jail, but he's far away from home. There was a time during the funeral that I made eye contact with his dad and I had that burning sensation in my heart that he knew it was me. I guess the world really is full circle. For some reason though, after that day I became the leader of everything. Nobody knew I was the one who gave Jacob the pill and I wanted to keep it like that. Nobody knew that was the reason it took his life. However, they knew though that my family had good shit. In a way I outshined Tricky, but I knew he didn't mind that. Jacob never was involved with the carry-on circle, but I knew he would have loved it. I know this may be fucked up to say, but I don't regret what I did. How was I supposed to know that was going to be the outcome? Everything happens for a reason and he died having a good time. I have to say though, when I get high and start thinking about the old days, it comes back to haunt me. It can be pretty hard to get out of that mindset too, but there's always a drug to fix that. Yo man, are ya good? We can't call 911 out here, so you better wake yo ass up. Antonio's vision came back, blurry, but enough to see the outline of the leader of the ranch standing over him. He grunted some forms of life. I just check in to make sure you're still alive, brother. I can't get high like that anymore. The memories are starting to haunt me. Antonio replied in a mix of words. You gots to smoke through the pain. We all have demons inside us, but we suffocate them with smoke. The brisk air tampered against Hallie's lips and skin. A shadow figure crossed paths in front of her. Even though her heart was racing, she was not frightened. The height and shape gave it away. Antonio?